Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're completely redefining how we look at the mining sector. We're taking abstract social friction, human emotion, protests, labor disputes, and we're translating it into hard, measurable financial data. It's absolutely fascinating how the abstract suddenly becomes totally concrete, and that is exactly what we're going to unpack today.
So, it's a huge question. What is the true cost of conflict? For a long time, community pushback and labor disputes were kind of just brushed off by some as public relations issues. But when you're running a massive mining operation, human friction above ground is literally just as disruptive as hitting solid bedrock below ground. We need to frame this correctly right out of the gate. These conflicts are massive, quantifiable operational risks. They stop bulldozers, they halt supply chains, and they cost millions of dollars.
And that brings us to the definitive rulebook for tracking this friction, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or SASB, which is now actually part of the IFRS Foundation. This isn't just some suggestion box for mining companies. It's the official authority that forces them to take what happens on the picket line and put a concrete, auditable number on it for investors.
Okay, let's dive right into this. SASB relies on two specific accounting codes to capture these hidden costs. First, under Community Relations, we've got code EMMM210B.2, which tracks non-technical delays. Right alongside that, under Labor Practices, code EMMM310A.2 monitors strikes and lockouts. Both of these are measured by frequency and duration in days. Let's deconstruct exactly how these codes actually work in practice.
First up, tracking non-technical delays.
So this is what happens when factors completely outside the actual digging and processing of minerals bring a multi-billion-dollar operation to a grinding halt. Under this standard, companies have to strictly track shutdowns caused by external roadblocks. We're talking about pending regulatory permits, local political hurdles, direct community resistance, and, in extreme cases, even armed conflict. A company could literally have the best engineers in the world, but if the local community blocks the access road, production drops to zero.
Moving on to our next category, measuring strikes and lockouts. Now, external community resistance is really only half the story. The other half is internal workforce friction. Before we get into the math, it's vital to contrast these two distinct categories. The standard very deliberately separates external community issues, like a protest over land rights or delayed permit, from internal labor relations, which involve the workers who are actually on the payroll. Keeping these distinct allows analysts to see exactly where the operational risk is coming from. Basically, is it an angry town or an angry workforce?
Right, so the standard defines a strike simply as a temporary stoppage of work by a group of employees to express a grievance or enforce a demand. Notice that it explicitly points out they don't even need to be union members. The defining characteristic here is that a strike is a bottom-up action, initiated directly by the workforce themselves.
And this brilliantly illustrates the flip side of that coin. A lockout is defined as a temporary withholding or denial of employment during a labor dispute to enforce terms of employment upon a group of employees. So while a strike is initiated by the workers, a lockout is a management-initiated stoppage. But to the investor looking at the bottom line, the result is the exact same. The mine isn't producing.
Now here is where the reporting rules get incredibly specific. 1,000. That is the massive number that serves as the strict SASB threshold. A company doesn't have to report every single minor disagreement on the factory floor. To actually trigger this specific disclosure, a work stoppage must involve 1,000 or more workers. We are talking about massive, systemic labor events.
Though wait, there's a second, absolutely vital condition. Not only must the stoppage involve 1,000 workers, but it must last one full shift or longer. A 20-minute walkout doesn't make the cut. SASB requires this immense scale just to ensure investors are only seeing severe, financially material labor disputes.
Which brings us to calculating the damage, calculating total days idle.
So, the crucial point is, how does this work? I love this part because it feels like an insider industry secret, but the methodology is beautifully simple. Step 1, identify the number of workers involved. Let's say it's 1,000. Step 2, count the days the stoppage lasted, say 5 days. Step 3, multiply the two together. 1,000 workers times 5 days equals 5,000 total days idle. Just like that, raw human emotion is transformed into a cold, unarguable data point.
But SASB knows that numbers in a vacuum don't really tell the whole story. Companies can't just hand over the math and walk away. The standard mandates that they must also impartially report the narrative. They have to describe the root cause. They are required to report the reason for the stoppage as stated by the labor force themselves, ensuring the workers' actual voices make it into the corporate filing. They must detail the effect on production, and finally, what corrective actions they took to resolve it. It forces real transparency on how the conflict is actually being managed.
Finally, let's look at why social metrics matter.
Standardizing this data across the entire global mining industry is a total game changer for corporate accountability. By tracking non-technical delays and massive work stoppages, we are making the invisible costs of conflict visible. Before these standards, a multi-week strike or a community protest blocking a site might have just been buried in a footnote, or maybe spun as a minor scheduling hiccup. Now, it's abstract social friction translated into concrete financial risk that investors, stakeholders, and the public can actually see and compare.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If we can measure social conflict this precisely, down to the exact number of idle days and the exact root causes, can it be prevented? Can rigorous environmental, social, and governance metrics actually incentivize companies to treat their workers better, respect community rights, and ultimately drive operational stability? I think it just might. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those hard questions, and I'll see you next time.